killed by clouds of beryllium radiation. Now in the 10th year of war, only a small crew remains. In a bunker, some miners are gambling for cigarettes. At that moment they see something moving on the security cameras, so they take a closer look with binoculars and discover that a Neb soldier is approaching. When he's finally close enough, they don't fire because they notice that something isn't right. Suddenly a loud screech can be heard as something begins to move very quickly under the sand. The soldier immediately shoots the thing to stop it, but more of these creatures arrive. They're called screamers and their screeching makes the soldier's ears hurt. He continuously shoots at them, yet the screamers keep coming and surround him. After also cutting his leg, they attack one last time to kill him. The miners watching this cry or puke at the sight. At that moment Chuck arrives and says that without the screamers, they would have already lost the war. When the screamers try to take the chopped arm too, Chuck opens fire to scare them off. Then he grabs the cylinder and discovers it's a message for the Alliance. Moments later Chuck brings the message to Commander Joseph, pointing out how strange it was to see a Neb soldier alone after 6 months of nothing. Joseph can't open the cylinder, which ends up popping on its own to eject the message. He takes the chance to inform him that they've picked up a message on the emergency bandwidth from a commercial transport requesting permission to land. The bunker is far from shipping lanes, so Joseph thinks it's strange for a commercial transport to fly in the area. He tells the officer to ask the transport what the emergency is. Then Chuck and Joseph notice that the message includes a map of Neb's command post. Joseph still thinks it's strange that they sent just one guy and not a full team, not to mention that the monitors indicate Neb hasn't had radio waves for 2 weeks. Sometime later Secretary Green arrives to talk to Joseph and Chuck. He informs them that Neb has asked for a ceasefire, so they can finally end the war. Beryllium has been found on Triton 4 and it doesn't have radiation, so Neb can start mining there soon. At that moment Green starts dissolving because he's actually a hologram message. The radiation from a dust storm is interfering with it, but after pressing a few buttons it goes back to normal. A chunk of the message was lost, so the duo only hears Green asking them to make no contact with the Neb base to avoid jeopardizing their chance. After the message ends, the duo goes to the bar and discusses the real chances of peace. Chuck wonders if Joseph will look for his ex-wife after this is over, but Joseph thinks she's probably moved on. At that moment, the crew is warned that the dust storm is coming closer, so they all light up a special red cigarette that protects them from radiation. Suddenly the building starts shaking and the lights go out as the furniture falls. The crew rushes outside and discovers that the commercial transport has crashed nearby. Some men work on putting out the fire while others enter the aircraft to look for survivors. They notice that the passengers aren't civilians, which means this isn't a commercial ship. All the people on the seats are dead, but they manage to find one such. He has to remove his hand quickly to avoid losing fingers. Joseph is a little worried because the data in the screamer indicates it's modified itself. When Chuck joins them, he tells Ace about the nuclear reactor and that the aircraft pretended to be a civilian ship. Ace didn't know any of that, but he does explain that all the passengers were on their way to Triton 4 to keep fighting Neb. A confused Joseph mentions Green's message, so Ace informs him that Green died 2 years ago. Joseph angrily kicks Ace out of his office before discussing the situation with Chuck, who doesn't believe Ace. He thinks that if the Alliance truly had abandoned them, they wouldn't keep sending them provisions. Joseph yells at him, asking him to accept the truth. They've been betrayed and left here to die. The Marshal probably knows this and that's why he sent the map. Joseph decides to attend the meeting and Chuck wants to go with him, but Joseph makes him the bunker leader in his absence and will take Ace instead. Afterward Chuck gives Ace his own bracelet. He explains that the screamers only attack living things because they can read pulse rates. The bracelet sends a transmission that makes it sound like their hearts are flatlining, although sometimes radioactivity corrodes the bracelet's terminals. Once Ace and Joseph are armed, they leave the bunker. Ace plays some music on his Discman for the duration of the trip, which has them walking through snowy areas. When Ace notices the air is terrible, Joseph explains that radiation makes it that way and gives him a red cigarette. They watch the abandoned mines from afar and Joseph points out that it used to be the most profitable business in the galaxy. Sometime later they reach the ruins of the city, which was bombed by Neb. Thousands of civilians died although the attack was supposed to be directed at the Alliance. Joseph shares that he came to this planet 20 years ago as a miner, and back then the crew worked for Neb. Eventually the crew refused to keep mining and after a standoff of 4 years, Neb bombarded the area. The crew has been hiding in the bunker since then. The story is interrupted by loud screeching. Ace turns around and watches a screamer dragging a dead rat under the snow. He quickly opens fire and the screamer runs away while Joseph tells him to stop. Ace wonders why the screamers want the bodies, so Joseph explains that rotting meat gives off methane gas, which the screamers use as fuel. The production of screamers happens underground and the process has been automated, so they make themselves. Nobody knows how, which creeps Ace out. After walking for a while, the duo hears a noise and immediately drops to the ground to hide. They get their guns ready, only to discover a child with a teddy bear. Joseph approaches him and learns the boy is named David. He lives in the city ruins alone and says he survives eating food, but he doesn't say what kind. He also claims he survived the screamers by hiding and asks the men to take him with them. Joseph refuses, but he gives him some food and promises to pick him up in 2 days when he returns home. However, Ace insists they can't abandon him and David keeps begging, so Joseph agrees to bring him with them. When night falls, the group rests inside an old building and starts a fire. Joseph calls the bunker and learns that they had a new arrival. The connection is weak, so the call doesn't last long. Then they talk about David and an argument ensues, so they point their guns at each other. They're interrupted by Jessica, who asks them to behave and shares some whiskey. Joseph talks to her in private and learns that there hasn't been a commissary in the building for over 2 years since the screamers started to attack. When he asks about the marshal, Jessica tells him he must be in a command bunker with the communication satellite. She also explains that there are entire hordes of Davids, who killed most of the soldiers here. Jessica agrees to take Joseph to the command bunker, but in return she wants to go back to Earth. Joseph explains that Earth has abandoned them and he can only take her to his bunker, which she accepts. Afterward, Joseph reunites with Ace, who has been looking around and has found several dangerous weapons, including plutonium. However, Joseph reminds him that the Alliance doesn't use nukes. The group then gets on an elevator that takes them to the maintenance tunnels. Ross is suddenly startled by a noise, but it's just a bunch of rats, and Becker teases him for being scared of them. After walking for a while, they find a grate in the ceiling and open it, causing a body to fall off. They use the grate to reach the next floor, where they climb a ladder that finally takes them to the command center. When they look around, they're horrified to discover blood everywhere but not a single person. Ross has a breakdown because he thinks there's no hope and starts throwing things off the tables. Joseph fires in the air to stop him and tells Ace to shoot him if he makes another noise. Next, Joseph tries to use the computer to contact Earth, but he keeps getting an error message. At that moment, a screamer enters the room, so the group hides behind the servers. The screamer climbs a knife out, he finds blood, so Becker killed an innocent man. Now Jessica thinks Becker may be a screamer too and realizes she didn't know he existed until 2 days ago. Becker dares her to shoot, but Jessica can't. When the group leaves the building, Joseph tries to call the bunker to no avail. Becker refuses to apologize because it was an accident, and Joseph says he'll kill him if necessary. After many hours of walking, they arrive at the Alliance bunker and Joseph finally manages to communicate with Chuck. He asks him to come out, but Chuck just keeps repeating that he should come in instead. A suspicious Joseph asks for the door to be opened, and the group is horrified to see a bunch of Davids coming out of the bunker with their teddy bears. The team immediately opens fire, bringing down the kids one by one. Soon the underground screamers also appear, so the group has to split their attention to shoot those as well. When the Davids get too close, the team activates their flamethrowers to melt them down. Unfortunately, more and more Davids keep coming out of the bunker. Joseph reveals that Ace stole a nuke from the command center and tells him to put it in his weapon. Then he shoots it at the bunker, causing a huge explosion that blows up the building and knocks the whole group out. In the morning, Ace wakes up and hears Becker asking for help because he's hurt, so he rushes to his side. However, Becker confirms he's a screamer and hugs Ace to start crushing him. By the time Joseph wakes up, Ace is already dead. Becker throws the body away before knocking Joseph down. Then Joseph shoots him in the face and damages his cheek, but it isn't enough to stop him. While Becker keeps talking about clanker philosophy, Joseph gets stronger ammo and shoots him again, this time splitting his body into two. Afterward, Joseph tells Jessica that there's an emergency vehicle programmed by the Alliance which they can use to go to Earth, although it's hidden in the mountains. Before leaving, Joseph takes Becker's chip and notices it has words in a language he doesn't recognize. When Jessica asks to see it, Joseph takes the chance to slash her hand. The wound bleeds, confirming she's human. Joseph bandages the injury while apologizing, saying he had to make sure she wasn't a screamer. He offers to put himself through the same test, but Jessica stops him and they kiss. Then the couple starts searching for the emergency ship. The cold is quite vicious and Jessica considers giving up. However, Joseph says she's all he has and promises to take her home. Sometime later, Joseph finds a panel under the snow and presses a button to open a hidden door in the mountains that takes them to a secret warehouse. While Jessica takes the elevator in the vehicle pit, Joseph tries to activate the system, but the buttons aren't working and tells her to go. She says she can't before a second Jessica appears behind them. It turns out she's a Type 4, which is so advanced that it can bleed and even get naughty. A furious Joseph pushes the first Jessica off and tries to get on the ship, only for the second Jessica to throw him against the crane. Then she tries to get on the ship too, but Jessica 1 comes back and starts fighting her for it. The screamers fight each other all over the place and keep getting wounded when they touch the security lasers. While Joseph sneaks around to grab a gun, Jessica 2 manages to stab the other one to defeat her. Then Joseph shoots the winner, who screeches to make Joseph fall. At that moment the aircraft activates, and the fire from the engines burns Jessica 2 until she explodes. Jessica